Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Hebert, Senior Education Coordinator at IDDBA. Thank you for joining today's webinar, which will look at how the online grocery landscape is changing and how those changes will impact retailers and suppliers alike. We hope this webinar provides you and your companies with actionable ideas to help you compete in today's changing environment. If any questions come to mind during the presentation, please use the Q&A box on the bottom right of your screen to submit them, and we'll work throughout the presentation to answer as many as we can. Now, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Hannah Donoghue. Hannah is a Senior Analyst at RetailNet Group and worked closely with IDDBA on this project. Hannah, we're happy to have you present some key findings from your research.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm very happy to be here with you all. As Alan mentioned, my name is Hannah Donoghue. I'm one of our senior analysts at RetailNet Group, and I had the pleasure of working with Alan and the IDDBA team on this research initiative. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Chelsea Gross, who also works on this project with us. And as Alan mentioned, if you send through any questions, she'll be fielding those and happy to answer them as we go throughout this presentation. So just to quickly introduce this work, really what we were looking for here and researching was how online grocery is going to impact the development of the retail landscape in the U.S. going forward. What are the different opportunities? What do the different digital business models look like? And for that specifically, we were really focused on two models. The first was click and collect, and the second was drive. And what I wanted to speak with you a little bit about today was how those models may evolve in the future. What are our forecasts, and what can we learn from other markets where they may be more developed to date to think about what the scenarios will look like for 2020. So the structure of this research report and initiative that we were looking at was really composed of two sections, and that's what I want to walk you through some of the learnings of today from this. The first was looking at really taking a landscape overview. What's driving the change that's fueling this growth in online grocery and the potential? What do the different business models look like, and how do they vary? How is online consumer behavior impacting this and changing? And what do we need to know about how the consumer will engage digitally in a different way specific to online grocery? We wanted to call out a few of the distinctions for click and collect versus drive. What do you need to know if you're working with different retailer partners on these initiatives? What are the key potential differences there when you're thinking about how you might approach them? Then we'll look at, as I mentioned, the global market development, what it may look like in the U.S., and then what are some of the implications. The second section is all around implications to suppliers and best practices. So specifically for perishables, fresh, dairy, deli, bakery categories, what does this look like online? Where are some collaboration and growth opportunities that we've seen and other potential ones to capture going forward? And then finally, just a few conclusions thinking about where your readiness is to date. Where is your e-readiness, and what's the opportunity, again, going forward? So that's the structure for today's conversation. And again, please feel free to jump in and ask any questions as they come along through the chat box. For those of you that aren't familiar with RetailNet Group, when we look at any scenario, and in this specific scenario, online grocery, we always take a future-back approach to strategic planning. So first, just thinking about in 2020, what will make it different than what today's scenario is? What will change or disrupt the past trends to make 2020 different? And so again, when we're thinking about online grocery, we wanted to first identify what would really be the key drivers of change that would shape the retail future. And when we're looking at those drivers, they typically come from 5 big areas, and we like to call this the STEEP model. So social or societal, technologic, economic, industry, and political drivers of change. And when we were thinking about online grocery specifically, there were 3 key drivers that we identified that were leading and shaping this new online grocery landscape. The first was a shifting shopper base, and a lot of that comes from the different societal and economic changes that are underway. The younger population that's digitally dependent, the population that's living in urban areas and looking for new ways and convenience, the transparency that's available. The second was really looking at technology as a whole, the innovation and adoption there. And as innovation has continued and adoption rates have gone up, the user experience has been improved, and that's also facilitating this transition to online grocery. And then the third is new supply chain and fulfillment approaches from an industry perspective that have been developed that are favorably changing the economics for some. And in some instances, this would be some of the intermediary companies or third-party companies that are providing new ways to support online grocery. So those were three of the big drivers when we thought about what's really going to fuel this change and how might it reshape the landscape going forward. From a consumer perspective in particular, consumers have higher expectations than ever, and they're rapidly increasing. This was an example provided by Ahold when they were thinking about their digital growth going forward. Consumers are expecting delivery times to go up. You can see retailers, both pure plays and store-based operators, pushing towards same-day or next-day delivery. They want delivery fees to go down, and in many instances expect there not to be a delivery cost associated, which obviously provides some diseconomies for the retailers and suppliers. And thirdly, they want and expect the assortment to go up. They want it to be unlimited and include fresh perimeter categories and services. So overall, from a consumer perspective, the expectations have never been higher. They have more transparency and information available than ever before. And so it's really creating this unique landscape where consumers want less friction and a more seamless, digitally integrated experience, both in and out of the store. So overall, this is really leading to a changing retail landscape and a retail value chain. Traditionally, it was brands selling and sending through logistics to the retailer, and then the retailer sells it to the consumer. And now there are just so many distinct paths to purchase of brands going direct, retailers going direct, marketplaces evolving with first and third-party sales, intermediaries like delivery networks, for example, with Instacart, influencing the transaction. So it's just leading to a much more complicated retail value chain that needs to be understood, and how online grocery specifically fits into this landscape. And so one of the critical things about digital when you think about the digital trip is it really aligns with all shopping occasions and household needs. While different digital business models align better with one versus the next, you're seeing the digital business models evolve so that they can capture the convenience and immediate needs through same-day delivery, or the stock up and pantry load through some of the store-based retailers' larger assortments online. You can see other intermediaries like Grubhub as a food service aggregator, or Blue Apron as a meal solutions platform, looking to cater to the on-the-go, prepared food, or grocery fill-in trip. So overall, the competitive intensity is heightened, and there's a new competitive landscape that's blended between digital and physical, where these digital retailers can cater to each. As a supplier, the big question will be, which part do you want to participate in? Which ones make the most sense for your categories, and how will this evolve going forward? Because grocery is always the last to move, but grocery is also the tipping point. So as grocery goes, the bigger impact will be on the stores as those products shift online. And even as your products may be slower to shift online, the store nevertheless is still impacted, with consumers coming in less frequently or fewer trips because they're available and conducting so many of those trips online. But online grocery does open up some important revenue avenues. And now this is an older slide by Tesco, but what they noticed was as they expanded in-store only, plus online grocery, plus general merchandise online, for those consumers that engaged across all of them, you could see that the consumer value was significantly higher as they had built a essentially walled garden around those consumers, driving a new level of loyalty and really bringing them into their network. And while online sales are not always incremental and often not incremental and it's more shifting, there is the opportunity, especially for those high-value shoppers, to retain their spend. And in a market like, and this is an example of the UK, but similarly in the US, where there's limited population growth, the big opportunity is really around customer retention as opposed to, or in addition to, customer acquisition, and really finding new ways to retain that spend and engage shoppers wherever they want to engage with you as a retailer. So through this work, we were looking at the different digital business models that were expanding and again, as I mentioned, the new entrants that are creating third-party options. So you can see here when you look specifically in click and collect, there's two different pieces to this. One that's more around general merchandise, and then others, which we were really looking here, was that full basket click and collect. And you can see that across pure play operators, brick-and-mortar.com, and then third parties, different players are all working towards this in the U.S. to capture the spend. At the same time, there's obviously some large-scale online grocery delivery business models, but many of those have been regional in nature due to the challenges of online grocery specifically. And while Drive is the least developed in the U.S. today, we do want to discuss the potential of that with you, as it provides a new level, a new layer of potential specifically for some of the fresh categories, and can see from examples like that of France where the growth potential is. So specifically talking about click and collect has really diversified. There's different ways to pick up the product. So some retailers are working towards picking up from the store or a distribution center through a drive-up. Others are putting the click and collect locations inside the store or in lockers, and others, like Whole Foods with some of their examples, have positioned Instacart locations in their stores for pickup. Now that's not in every Whole Foods or every Whole Foods that has a partnership with Instacart, but you can see that the options are fragmenting and really looking to cater to any way that consumers would prefer to pick up the product. Where the complexity arises is this tends to not be a one-size-fits-all model with different needs based on the population, and again, we'll talk about that later, but really understanding going forward, and one opportunity for supplier collaboration is really supporting on the analytics to understand the specific demographics of the areas around the store to really make sure that you right-size the opportunity, because click and collect is not just one standard approach. And really, retailers and suppliers, as you're supporting retailers in this initiative, need to weigh the digital business model options and think about, from the consumer perspective, what are the different trade-offs. So from a consumer perspective, in-store click and collect tends to be a more affordable or free service. They have more contact with the staff in the store, which is a positive both from the consumer and the retailer side. You can pay in the store, which provides a different level of flexibility. There's some flexibility, and same-day delivery is often possible. Now, on the opposite side for consumers, it may be, the biggest thing is it may be less time efficient to actually have to go into the store, load the products on your own, and take the product home. Whereas if you compare that to delivery, obviously, it's a higher cost, and you do need, in some instances, to be at home, but it's a full-service offering, and it's much more time efficient and don't have to carry the product. On the Drive side, there's a blend of that where, again, you save some time efficiency. You can pay at delivery, but you still do need to drive to the store and have to carry the product home. So again, from the consumer perspective, each consumer is going to be weighing these different options and understanding, again, at the local level, the consumer value equation and what the consumers overall would prefer. is very important in order to make sure that the right digital business model is in place for that individual market. And so when comparing click and collect and drive, for example, you can see that this is specifically Tesco's click and collect. And so you can see the consumer logs in, orders online, drives to the location, is told where to park, and then told the picker brings and loads the product to the car in this example and pulls out. Now you can see here in the example on the right from Tesco that depending on their format and the store, the location of the click and collect varies significantly. And there are strengths and weaknesses to each location. You know, in the store there's the opportunity for impulse, and you're seeing click and collect located more closely towards fresh categories and the perimeter categories to drive impulse there, as seen from experience over time, that when click and collect is located adjacent to these categories, it is driving sales. In other instances, it's located outside the store, and then in some instances, it can disrupt the traffic. So there's a lot of complexity there again, in even just the location of the click and collect. But one of the key distinctions with click and collect versus drive is that it is attached or adjacent to the actual store. So you're leveraging the store base, you're leveraging the real estate versus a drive, which is very different in the actual location of the physical pickup. And Tesco in the UK is probably one of the most developed click and collect retailers. So when thinking about one to look at for best in class, Tesco has really well developed this model. Comparatively, from a drive perspective, drive is really about automation and standardization. Where you compare that to the previous example of click and collect, there's a lot of flexibility in the location and the different business models. Drive, the consumer comes in, checks in at the machine, and Auchan in France has one of the most well-developed drive models. The machine processes the request. You are attached to your loyalty card, so again, you can see that very quickly. And then you pay online or you pay at the kiosk, and from there, it authenticates the payment, and then you take your receipt and proceed to your space. And typically, you're out in 5 minutes or less, and at the same prices as the hypermarket. So that's the promise here. And that's one critical piece going forward that is still evolving, is the role in the future of pricing and promotion specific to digital business models and online grocery. There's a lot still left to understand there and a lot that's evolving, but with these new levels of transparency, it will be highly impacted. So what are some of the key distinctions and trade-offs there for these? So you can see when you look at the CapEx, obviously delivery has the highest CapEx involved, and drive tends to have the highest gross margin, whereas drive has a very high SKU range because you have that dedicated center, fulfillment center, that is located, and the drive locations tend to be off the highway in a convenient pull-on, pull-off location. Productivity, delivery again tends to have the higher productivity per hour, and you can see here, so some of the strengths of really doing a store-picked click and collect location. You know, it's a lower capital investment. It does minimize in the beginning some self-cannibalization in early stages. It increases the service levels, and you're already working with an established supply chain. But there are some challenges as the assortment tends to be limited towards the in-store stock. Now, some retailers do this differently. Some will fulfill their click and collect outside of the store in a fulfillment center and then bring the click and collect orders to the store. And again, each of those have their benefits. And then it's lower labor efficiency. One of the challenges with click and collect is that once it reaches about 10% of the store's volume, it tends to hit a threshold. So that's where you're seeing in the developed markets, retailers shifting towards dark stores in order to address this. On the drive side, Some of the strengths is you have a full store selection. So you essentially have a store that's set up to pick from without any of the merchandising, but you have the full assortment or a larger assortment. It's much more convenient. The lack of a delivery cost is attractive to many of the price-sensitive consumers that are looking to save time but don't necessarily want to pay for delivery. And it can help win fill-in trips in an easier way for consumers picking up the orders after work. It does provide some tight time constraints, which is a challenge, and shoppers do often prefer delivery if it is available, so it needs to be in the right location. And in some instances, there is limited inventory at a specific drive location. So again, managing the assortment is critical for this. So overall, you can see each has its benefits, and what we want to discuss coming up is really just the distinctions of when you would see which business model being used. And so there are some key opportunities and efficiencies within the drive model specifically to win this trip. So what you can see from Auchan is the picker wears on the right a finger scanner in order to optimize time. So they're really working on labor optimization, and that's also the employee who brings the order to the vehicle. So for smaller orders, they're picking the order right as you arrive so that it emphasizes freshness. So again, for some of your categories, this is particularly important. And these products they'll tend to bring out crates that are color-coded by temperature zone so that you can ensure that the products are kept at the right temperature and are optimized for shelf life. At the same time, some of the drives are trying to drive impulse in a different environment. And so you can see here for those products that are close to expiring, they'll place them there for potential impulse in a very, very quick trip through the drive. So what are some of the different market characteristics that predetermine the success? When you're thinking about the U.S. and where it might go, how different digital business models would grow or evolve. So again, in France, the drive model is preferred, where there's a lower population density, consumers are more spread out, a higher share own their own vehicle. Shoppers strongly prefer fresh and quality. It's a big focus in their value equation, and you have a high share of working females in dual-income households. In the UK, a lower percentage own their own vehicles. There's higher population density and lower share of dual-income households, but the first two bullets most likely being the most important in dictating which business model has evolved. And so in France, what you can see here is if you look at France, Auchan opened the first drive in 2000, and others quickly followed. And by 2007, the total drive market had surpassed the $1 billion mark in sales and is expected to just continue growing. Now, while it will slow relative to the rapid expansion, during the peak, their total drive locations almost doubled each year during those key formative years. And now we're expecting about 200 drive locations across all of the top retailers in France in total to be added per year. So when we look at France and where the top metros are for drive, there's 4 big metros that each have somewhere between 20 to 30 or so, and this is as about 3 to 4 months ago, how many different drive locations. And again, it's primarily driven by Leclerc, Auchan, Carrefour, and Casino. But what you can see here is all of the top retailers in France have had to evolve and really change their capital allocation to invest in these different business models. And you can see Leclerc has the most well-developed network in these specific locations and is continuing to drive this growth. So when we're thinking about a U.S. scenario, again, thinking about where this may go in the U.S. and how you might think about prioritizing it, what areas, what locations might you expect it, there were 3 key commonalities in France that are important to know about. The first is location, surrounding urban centers, but not directly being inside the city limits. So again, typically in locations that has an easy on and off ramp to the highway where consumers can go on their way from work. And the key to this is that they tend to be in areas with lower real estate costs. So you're not paying for the high costs where a store would typically be located. You want to have mid-tier congestion, so not too much traffic where it's impossible to get on and off and access easily, but you still need enough traffic to make sure that there are convenient locations. And then finally, you need to have above average household income compared to the market for that area. So taking all of that and thinking about the U.S. specifically, and again, what could the potential in the U.S. landscape be? When you look at grocery sales, online grocery sales by fulfillment type, you can see that most of these retailers are tending to shift towards either 100% delivery or close, 90 to 100% delivery and only 10% click and collect, or the opposite. ShopRite is the one that's probably closest to the middle in terms of balancing a click and collect and delivery approach. But what you can see is that many of the top pure plays or the emerging pure plays and regional grocers are really working towards developing these business models. While many are still small in scale today, there is significant potential for growth. So again, when you're looking at these models, it remains highly, highly regional. And you can see that while some of these continue to add regions, with Amazon Fresh, for example, adding regions in other markets, you can see here that they tend to target, with the exception of Walmart, have a pricing strategy that's more aspirational or mainstream in nature, targeting families, again, those that are time-strapped. They often do carry delivery fees to make the economics work. And while we didn't talk about this in here, you are seeing the evolution of different delivery passes and programs there in order to support the economics and, again, lock consumers into that spend. So if they've already invested in a year-long fee for shipping, it's new ways of building that walled garden. Most have same-day delivery options. Again, for this online grocery assortment, that piece is important. A lot do carry a minimum order threshold between usually $30 to $50 and do have different delivery options linked to a loyalty program. What you can just see here is that it's very regional in nature. Everyone's taking a slightly different approach, but the business models are evolving but are still smaller scale to date. And so, again, you can see here when you think about these, and different retailers have added some. What I wanted to call out specifically here was Instacart and third-party networks like Instacart working with Whole Foods, for example, to drive new impulse, increase the basket size, particularly in-store baskets as well, and really create a unique business model for retailers to leverage where they don't have to spend on the same on logistics as if they were building out their logistics network on their own. The drive does exist in the U.S. today, but as of the beginning of this year, there were only 3 retailers that had drives. One of them was Walmart, one was Ahold, and one was a small regional independent that launched the format. And so similarly, you can see in Walmart's drive, and Walmart's planning to open their second in Rogers. The other one is also near headquarters. And they've announced, it takes about 30 weeks following the announcement to tend to open one of these drive locations. But using the drive, Walmart and others likely will use these models to complement really their broader strategy that blends delivery-only models with pickup-only models. And really this is going to depend on the market. So for Walmart, San Jose has more so been a delivery model, where Denver has more been the evolution of pickup for them. So again, each retailer is going to approach this slightly differently, but we do expect this to take off as the retailers start to leverage this business model in unique ways because of the challenges in the economics of online grocery specifically. And you can see here some of the independents. This is an example from Zoom In Market. They were inspired by a Sean's Drive format, and it's the same idea. They brought this to the U.S. Where your order can be ready in 30 minutes. There isn't a service charge, and again, it's that digitally integrated experience that's trying to adapt to the challenges of online grocery and the perimeter categories specifically. So those are a few examples, but what could this look like in the U.S. going forward? So we built a scenario for 10 to 15 years from today. What are some of the key metros where Drive might evolve? And in this, we were looking at per capita real GDP, median household income, again, the share that owns a vehicle, population density, and then the share that actually use public transportation. And so you could see that there were some metros where we believe this might fare better than others. And we expect for a couple of key metros, there may be more than 30 Drive locations in those areas. Now, New York, we have under 10, and that tends to be due to density of the population that would lead them to most likely prefer a delivery option, again, with many not having cars. Now, that doesn't mean in the surrounding areas by New York there won't be Drives, and we expect there could be up to 10 Drives in those locations. How did we get to this? It's really all about, as we said, the demographics and density. So if there's too high a density, there's too much congestion, it makes Drives much harder, and it tends to correlate to lower car ownership. And you can see some of the ideals for France versus the UK and how that compares to these different markets, where Houston is closer to the ideal market compared to New York because of the demographics. And then when you look here, again, comparing vehicle ownership and household income aligned with population density, you can see that there are a lot of markets, as we were saying, that really do have that potential. So when you think about where these may evolve and where you need to watch out for them, these are some of the metros that we've identified where we think there is that potential for growth. So what does this mean for the retailers specifically? It means that retailers, as they're thinking about their strategic key initiatives, they're going to need to align these to online grocery. So for the retailers, we look at retailers by positioning, whether they tend to be a low-cost or a differentiated approach. And for differentiated retailers that are all about the experience, online grocery is going to continue to be a challenge. Now, there is opportunities for premiumization, but there is less opportunity for food theater, or it needs to be worked in very carefully. For low-cost retailers, some of the challenges is the investment in these business models. So you'll see their decisions vary based on the positioning. It's requiring new capabilities and new ways of thinking, particularly compared to the pure play retailers. Their merchandisers tend to be, or their buyers tend to be marketers. They're responsible for driving daily demand. And so for the retailers, when they're thinking about this, it will require new capabilities, potentially new structures, and really new ways of thinking. So again, as a supplier, as retailers begin to grow these business models and you're partnering with them, you need to be thinking about unique ways and unique approaches to supporting daily demand-driven initiatives, because it will be less about the longer term and more about really driving that unique day. It's going to mean for many of these retailers, if they're integrating click and collect into their box, it's going to be a part of a store and network process, which obviously requires capital investment and it requires space reallocation. For some big box retailers that are looking to reallocate space, click and collect is one way to do so. It will have an enormous impact on the pricing and promotion environment, both in and out of the store. And that's a whole other discussion, but really thinking about pricing and promotion, we're expecting it to be much more personalized. Again, fresh is the hardest to transfer online, but it's starting to go. And as that goes, it will impact the overall pricing and promotion environment, both in and out of the store. payment. It's going to require for the retailer to have new payment capabilities, and obviously an enormous impact on the supply chain and logistics capabilities needed in an effort to continually innovate and improve the economics of the logistics. And to the store specifically, store picking has an impact in that it impacts the merchandising. There's an opportunity because some retailers have leveraged the pickers to identify to store managers when products are out of stock. At the same time, they can sometimes be the ones that are driving the out of stocks if the online orders get too high in terms of fulfillment relative to the total store. There's going to be questions for the retailers on how many pickup bays they want to have, the location of those pickup bays within the store. Again, going back to earlier, what's the most convenient location for consumers that are coming in and out of the store, where they can still potentially drive impulse if they are coming into the store, and also not disrupting those shoppers that have chosen to come into the store as well. So the other opportunity from a retailer implication standpoint is how are they going to drive incrementality? So in terms of reaching new shoppers, it's going to be about capturing other groups of transactions. So B2B, what is the opportunity with catering, for example, to reach new shoppers? As we started off the discussion today, we were talking about customer retention versus customer acquisition. Now, customer acquisition is a challenge, but being able to reach new shoppers, like through business-to-business opportunities, gives these retailers a way to expand their shopper base. It does provide, in some instances, ways to expand the catchment area and capture new share of household requirements. And on the expanding consumption side, there's a lot of work both around larger and smaller pack sizes, the delivery passes that I was mentioning earlier from a shipping standpoint, and many different retailers, particularly around grocery and health and beauty, are looking at auto-replenishment capabilities to just drive that repeat frequency of spend. For some, there's a premiumization or upsell opportunity, but again, a lot of that has to do with ability to really have the right content with the right reviews to drive up the premiumization and really emphasize that food theater experience online. And some of that you'll see is through specialization or gourmet artisan products. And then how do you gain wallet share? So within customer retention, if you're retaining the shoppers, how do you capture fair share or more than that of household requirements? And again, it's one way for online grocery specifically. While much more of e-commerce has been about fragmenting trips, online grocery tends to consolidate trips, and so there's an opportunity there competitively to gain share. So what's one example, thinking specifically on your categories, I think Waitrose is a very good example of someone who's focused on having that best-in-class presentation and merchandising. So one you can see is around meal solutions specifically. And each is indicated by how quickly it will be available and how many people it will serve. So again, just a very frictionless experience with meal solutions labeled by size and prep time, and allows consumers also to personalize the meal solutions for their family. There's also more flexibility Waitrose has for your category specifically around pack sizes. So they're creating unique pack sizes, both in single serve and larger pack sizes that are really improving the shopper experience, and they're doing eaches for their own private label to cater to consumers looking for an on-the-go quick trip online. And then finally, they're looking at food theater. So you can see here for cheese specifically, they've really worked at creating cheese boards by theme, and again, just creating that premium feel to the online experience. So just to summarize and really focus the rest of our conversation on implications and best practices, obviously perishables, deli, dairy, bakery, and some of the other perimeter categories tend to be the last to shift online. From an online grocery perspective, though, these are obviously key categories, and so retailers are really looking for innovation and supplier partnerships around these key categories, as again, once grocery goes, and especially the perimeter categories, it will really reach, e-commerce will reach that key tipping point. So you can see for many of these, though, some of your categories tend to not be more than 10% of their assortment, whereas some of the, and this is again for online, this is at the highest from the online grocers. Now when you were to compare that to some of the larger scale, different general merchandise included assortment, you can see here for Amazon comparatively, when you bring in GM, the assortment is much, much larger. But again, it's really the focus on how do you shift perishables online and address some of the key assortment challenges. So some of the key attributes to address, the first is just the low cost to weight ratio. Those products that tend to shift online the easiest tend to be low cube, low weight, high dollar density, one way, not returnable, and not temperature controlled. And so again, some of the challenges in that are the short shelf life and freshness of the product and consumer perception, where consumers are particularly careful about what they're ordering online. High minimum orders also present challenges for some of the lower dollar products, lower price products. And then again, looking at profit contribution when considering selling these products online. So as a supplier, what are some of the big opportunities? So again, the first is in top-to-tops, really looking at how to re-innovate the customer development process, going in with the key questions to really understand how your retailer partners are shifting their capital allocation. How are they thinking about digital? Where are they investing? What are the analytics that they need? Not just big data, but really how are they taking that data and applying it to the specific market level and even one click below that? How are they narrowing the data to understand the demographics, to really understand what the right business model should be to put in place? On the brand offer side, it's going to be around positioning, packaging, attributes, really needing strong content with different unique pack sizes, and again, potential for different solution-based merchandising, thinking about how you can drive those packs to increase the basket size. Obviously, support on the retailer economics, supply chain, again, with the challenges and the cost of logistics. These are some of the focus areas and potential supplier collaboration opportunities around sourcing, having better real-time inventory locations and understanding. And then on the merchandising side, particular opportunities around seasonal. How can you drive impulse? So if the click and collect location is within the store, how can you coordinate with the click and collect location to drive impulse in your categories in the store, but also online? Where are the key opportunities to create this? How do you emphasize new? New can be challenging in an online environment because the merchandising in the same way isn't there. It's harder to look at multiple products online and really focus on that one SKU. So how do you create new and drive that excitement online? And then again, one of the biggest opportunities again is around the insights and the analytics to get to the right business models. So again, you know, we were talking about 30 or 40 viable metros in the U.S. How do you help your retailer partners understand those metros, what's going to be needed for the different business models there, and how might they attract shoppers, particularly around your key categories, to help online grocery reach that tipping point? What are some of the big areas that we've looked at? One is around list management, needing to make sure that your product is on the list because retailers are building in different capabilities to really capture and emphasize and create a frictionless experience within the ordering process. So how do you, retailers are creating lists from previous orders and really making the list management process easier so that it's click to list, scan to list, say to list, and then right from there it can be even click to buy. So again, this process is becoming even quicker And so making sure that you're on the list from the start is important. At the same time, they're building in different filters, like NutriFilters. And so again, understanding for your product how they fit in the ability to search and sort by different criteria. No longer going to be just about sorting by the aisle. So as retailers are looking to drive up their health credentials and really create a new level of health accountability, your categories will play a key role in that. And understanding what capabilities retailers are building in to be able to sort by either a dietary need or food preferences or ethnic flavor palettes. So what you can see here is just, again, more better improvement in list building capabilities and the ideas like did you forget to drive that impulse as well. There's a lot of innovation around mobile. So 40% of sessions are mobilely related or mobilely influenced. And so you can see that as consumers are using mobile, the average order tends to be higher in this example that we're looking at. And in many of these online orders, consumers are coming back, 3 to 6 times to edit their list within their family. And so mobile capabilities allow consumers to really refine, edit, and add to the list, and again, just facilitate any friction points. And you can see that there are some examples from a retailer collaboration standpoint that have already happened. And in this initiative, we were looking at and described the Barilla and Peapod partnership around meal kits and meals under 30 minutes that were easy to make and easy to add to the list. So again, these retailers are looking for partnerships. They're looking for innovation and finding new ways. And this is just one example, and it's expanded quite a bit from this example in 2014, and we expect to continue to grow. And one other additional growth opportunity is around catering. B2B catering can also lead towards more B2C or consumers ordering online once they've become loyal B2B shoppers through their companies. And so you can see for Peapod and Ahold together, in addition to Coburn's as another example, that B2B is really an opportunity not just in offices, but also for buying bulk or for care homes, depending on the population, or nurseries, parties. There's a lot of opportunity here specific to your category as retailers are innovating in the personalization and customization order process online. And we believe this will be a core driver of online grocery and specifically for your categories. So as you're thinking about it and really thinking going forward about where you stand today, it's important to understand for your company what your e-readiness looks like and where you want to be over the next 3 to 5 years. So on the first side, it's really on the sidelines where your e-commerce strategy is primarily defensive and the ROI is still unclear. With tactical resourcing, your customers, your retailer customers that you're partnering with tend to be not tiered, and there's a little e-retailer engagement model. That would say, we would classify that as sort of the earliest stages, more on the sidelines, looking at digital influence, but less about selling. Ready. So e-commerce is now a strategic priority. You have dedicated resources available, but they're not yet fully deployed or fully fleshed out within the business model or business case for your organization. You're just tactically defining some of the key initiatives or logistics capabilities. You still have a more channel agnostic, or don't have a channel agnostic strategy, and decision rights aren't clear and well communicated. And then leading, really having a clearly defined model for e-commerce ROI with a strong segmentation for your customers and tiers, and this is for e-commerce customers specifically, and including those that have store-based operations. Digital, you really have a digital learning, digital test and learn innovation centers continue to grow, and you really have a clear strategy around your support systems for e-commerce growth. And again, with a clear funding model and understanding of the need to stay ahead of the curve. So there are 3 different places that you can be, and it's just important to understand where you stand now and where your goal is for 3 to 5 years, because this is moving quickly, and you need to be able to move with your retailer partners as they shift along this curve as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you may have, but otherwise, if there are no questions, I really appreciate your time today, and we wanted to provide our contact information. If any questions come up in the future, we're happy to answer them.
All right, thanks, Hannah. I don't see any questions that have come through. So with that, I'll say thanks for that look at the click and collect and drive models, and we're seeing these formats gaining some popularity in the U.S., and that, along with the similarities between areas in the United States and areas in Europe where click and collect and drive models are already more popular, indicates to me that U.S. retailers and suppliers should be ready for a quick increase in these formats. I hope everyone had a chance to note some new ideas that will help with marketing, product, and selling strategies. We'll be sending a link to the presentation to the attendees today, so you can all review the material that we went through today and ask any questions of RetailNet Group that you have. And at IDDBA, we appreciate your engagement. You can interact with us at iddba.org or email our education team at education@iddba.org. Thanks again for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day.